Good morning, and thanks for joining us on this busy Thanksgiving holiday. I'm Jessica Layton, in for Joe and Savannah today. And we begin this morning in Washington, where two National Guard members are in critical condition after a shooting in the U.S. Capitol. The two officers were shot just blocks from the White House on Wednesday afternoon in what authorities are calling a targeted attack. President Trump was not at the White House at the time of the shooting, as he is spending the holiday in Mar-a-Lago. A suspect is in custody after he was shot on the scene and taken to a nearby hospital for treatment. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Melanie Zanona joining us now from Washington with more on this. Melanie, good morning. Can you walk us through how the attack unfolded yesterday and where we stand on the investigation this morning?
Yeah, good morning, Jess. So this shooting occurred yesterday afternoon, just blocks away from the White House and also right near a very popular metro station. And again, this was in the afternoon, in the daylight. According to witnesses, the suspect raised his firearm and then ambushed a group of National Guardsmen, shooting at least two of them, both from West Virginia. They are in critical condition as of this morning. And then the gunman himself was also shot. As these other troops heard the scuffle, they came to the scene, and then they held down the gunman until the police arrived. You also see some remarkable footage there of those first responders working on some of the guardsmen. So this was just a brazen attack of violence in the middle of the day, again, right by the White House. Thankfully, the president was not there, but it certainly has the community on edge. As terms of investigation, the FBI has taken the reins on this. They are investigating this as a potential act of terrorism. Of course, that can also always change as these things are very fluid. And we'll get an update further this morning at a press conference about all of this.
Okay, and Melanie, you know, we know that we are early on in this investigation, but what more do we know about the suspect, and is there any inkling on a motive yet?
So we are actually learning some more information about the suspect. His name is Ramanullah Lakanwal. He's a 29-year-old Afghan national, and he arrived in the United States in 2021. He actually was a part of the Afghan army and served alongside U.S. Special Forces during the war. He was brought here and then eventually settled in Washington State. And according to his relatives, he has a wife, he has kids, and they are at a complete loss for why he would have committed this horrific act of violence. Now, as far as a motive, the police have not yet revealed what the motive could be. It is still early, as you mentioned, in the investigation, but perhaps we could get some more updates later this morning at that press conference that I mentioned.
And Melanie, the attack is coming one day after the president said, quote, "You could walk down any street in Washington and be just fine." And then he thanked the National Guard, which we know has been deployed in the Capitol since May. You mentioned the community is on edge. How else are they feeling? How is that community responding to this attack right now?
Well, certainly people are scared. Crime has been a real problem in Washington, D.C. for years. But there are other residents who felt strongly that the National Guard should have never been here in the first place. We do have some reaction, though, from someone who was nearby. Let's take a listen to that person and what they had to say.
I wanted to cry. I've never been so close to something like that, let alone it's the holidays.
It's a pretty scary scene. You don't see it every day.
It's going to bring a narrative, and I am a little bit concerned that, you know, this city is going to have much more of a military presence and much more of a police presence.
Now, there are already over 2,000 National Guard troops stationed here in D.C. In response to the shooting, though, President Trump, he wants to send at least 500 more National Guardsmen to the area. In addition, we're also learning that the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services has paused requests for Afghan nationals, is stopping indefinitely, quote, pending further review of security and vetting protocols. So we're already seeing a response to this horrific shooting.
There's much more to come after that press conference. All right, Melanie Zanona, thank you so much. Let's continue the conversation with NBC News Chief Justice and National Affairs correspondent Kelly O'Donnell, joining us this morning from West Palm Beach, Florida, where President Trump will be spending Thanksgiving. Kelly, good morning. How is the president and the White House reacting to the shooting?
Well, good morning. The president responded in two ways. First, a social media post, and then the White House did its own internal video that it put out where the president addressed this shooting and expressed his outrage and outlined a few steps that he is taking. He is ordering the call-up of an additional 500 National Guard troops, asking Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, to make that happen for the District of Columbia. So that's one step. He is also saying that there needs to be a review of all of those refugees who came in, asylees who came into the United States under the Biden administration program after the fall of the Afghan war. And the president is saying that there needs to be new vetting on that. Now, the State Department had already begun an initiation of reviewing some of those asylum seekers who were brought into the United States at that time. But the president is now saying there needs to be a more careful review. As we know, this individual, the suspect, had been a part of the Afghan army, came to the United States in 2021, and he was given what is known as asylum after experiencing the immigration parole period under the Biden administration. Under the Trump administration, he was actually granted that asylum. So the president, of course, is venting his outrage about this and also promising that there will be steep price to be paid for the individual that has been taken into custody. So the president has been speaking on this, and we don't know what he will do today. It is, of course, the holiday. The president does not have anything on his public schedule. But as developments become known and more in the investigation may be processed, we could expect to hear from him again. Jessica?
All right, Kelly, let's move on to some other news while we have you here this morning. A reporter from the New York Times, Katie Rogers, now the latest female journalist to be insulted by President Trump. What can you tell us about that? And really now the broader trend of insults that we've been seeing from the president recently.
Well, there have been a collection of attacks that the president has done verbally toward a group of female reporters in recent weeks. But the reality is the president has long been critical of reporters, has often lashed out at reporters. That is nothing new. He's been doing that for many years. These incidents stood out in part because they appeared to take on a more personal nature, referring to one reporter as quiet piggy is the phrase that he used. Another, he said she was ugly on the inside and out. Those are very personal attacks. The president often will insult reporters, both men and women, calling them fake news and saying they're terrible reporters. But this took on a more personal nature, and some would argue that it was particularly offensive to women reporters. The three women reporters who were on the receiving end of this are all veteran journalists who have covered the White House for a long time and are all very professional and known to the president. It is part of the president's style. The White House says he is frank and direct with reporters. Certainly, viewers and listeners can make their own assessment about what is behind that, but the president has a long pattern of it. We've seen a few instances in recent days where it has been particularly sharp and personal and directed at female reporters.
Yeah, piggy and ugly in just the last week and a half or so. Finally, Kelly, elsewhere, an appeals court has upheld a $1 million penalty against President Trump over what they're calling a frivolous Hillary Clinton lawsuit. Remind us what this was all about and why the appeals court upheld the penalty.
Well, this is a case where the president and his lawyers tried to seek an assessment of $24 million against Hillary Clinton and Democrats for the 2016 election, saying that they engaged in malicious prosecution. Well, the three-judge panel said there was no prosecution. There were no trade secrets involved, that this was basically a lawsuit that was on its face frivolous. And because of that, they say that President Trump is known to be a frequent litigant, understands the legal system, and he and his lawyers are therefore responsible for a nearly $1 million penalty for bringing these sort of fictitious claims to the court, using the court system in a way that is not valid. And so that has been upheld by this panel, and the president at this point is still liable for that penalty. The White House is indicating that they will continue to fight it.
All right, Kelly, a lot going on. Thanks so much for joining us today. The Georgia election interference case against President Trump and his co-defendants has been officially dismissed. A federal judge made the decision yesterday after the new prosecutor who took over the case said he was dropping the charges. Now, you might remember this was the final criminal prosecution the president was still facing. It stemmed from his efforts to subvert the election in 2020. NBC News legal analyst Angela Sanadella joins me now with more on this. Angela, good morning. First off, just tell us a bit about the new prosecutor and how he took the case over from Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, who we know was disqualified.
Good morning. Yeah, it is quite a circuitous story. So he is the executive director of a nonprofit called the Prosecuting Attorneys Council. And basically, it's just a group of prosecutors within Georgia. Now, he was legally tasked after Fani Willis was removed from the case and her appeal was declined. He was legally tasked to find a new prosecutor for this case. Now, he says earlier this month, he said that he tried to find other prosecutors and they all rejected to take on the case. And as a result, he had two options. One, he could just kind of let it lapse and tell the judge he couldn't find a new prosecutor, or as he decided to do, he could take the case on himself. So that's what he decided to do. Now, he has been a career prosecutor for over 40 years in the state of Georgia, and he has run both as a Republican and as a Democrat. And I will say it does appear that he is widely respected on both sides of the aisle within that state.
So this prosecutor said the case was, quote, without precedent. I think a lot of people might have an issue with that. Tell us a bit more about what that means and essentially, in the end, why the charges had to be dropped.
So look, first of all, it's important to understand that this is a RICO case. This was not just a case brought against Donald Trump. There were many other defendants. So he does note in his filing that he even considered the option of severing some of the defendants and trying them now. But legally, it does seem to be an impossibility at this time to continue prosecuting the case against a sitting president. So what that means then is that it would have to be delayed to at least 2029, maybe even 2031. And at that point, it seems somewhat of an impossibility for him to proceed, just given the delays and given, again, the fact that it involves many different defendants. Also, he does note in his filing his own perspective on the case after having reviewed it, that he believes there is at least a plausible argument that that this could be considered a challenge to the results, and that in itself, a president challenging the results isn't necessarily illegal from his perspective.
Reacting to the decision, President Trump's lawyer said this in a statement, quote, "The political persecution of President Trump by disqualified DA Fani Willis is finally over. This case should have never been brought. A fair and impartial prosecutor has put an end to this lawfare." And we remember President Trump saying over and over that it was a witch hunt. Is this really the end of the road for this case? Could a different prosecutor revisit the charges, or is this something that just nobody is going to want to touch?
Also, look, legally, it's not like there's some example of double jeopardy here where there's no chance that it could be brought again. But realistically, it seems somewhat of an impossibility. Again, just given the fact that this prosecutor himself tried to find another prosecutor within the state of Georgia and nobody was willing to take on the case, that itself is a sign. And then also just for it to be on record that his opinion is that there is a plausible legal defense in President Trump's favor, again, makes it very difficult for a new prosecutor then to bring new charges in this case. Jessica.
Makes sense. Angela Senadella, thank you. Switching gears now, here in New York, the floats are in place, the balloons are inflated, and more than 3.5 million people are lining the streets of Manhattan right now to watch the 99th annual Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. NYPD has been out in force, making sure the people are safe during these festivities. Even though there's no specific threat, they are on high alert after yesterday's shooting in Washington, D.C. But the weather could be a bigger concern as wind gusts up to 35 miles an hour are in the forecast along the parade route this morning, prompting parade organizers to take extra precautions to help keep control of the famous balloons and try to prevent what happened back in 1997 when some of those balloons were seriously damaged during the parade. NBC News correspondent Emily Ikeda is out in the middle of all of it and brings us the latest. Emily, good morning.
Hey there, well, it's me and 3.5 million of my closest friends lining the New York City streets in preparation for the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, which will boast 34 gigantic balloons, old and new faces. There will also be a significant security presence, and you can see some of it behind me from the NYPD. Thousands of police officers lining the streets. There are drones, dogs, helicopters, vehicles, and a lot of blockades. The NYPD says that there's no specific threat to this major event, but acknowledges it is tracking closely the tragic shooting in Washington, D.C. last night. Officials are also watching the wind closely, with forecasted wind gusts around 30 miles an hour potentially throughout the day. And the wind has proven problematic in the past. Back in 1997, a windstorm wreaked havoc on the parade, and it actually prompted officials to start banning balloons from flying in high winds. More recently, in recent years, they have forced the balloons to fly at a lower height in gusty conditions. No official word from officials on that yet. By the way, you can't bring strollers, large bags, umbrellas. There's a whole laundry list of things you can't bring, but I'll show you the thing that there will be a lot of going around this morning, and that is hand warmers, because the wind chill is around 30 degrees. Back to you.
Emily, thanks so much. And as Emily just reported, the weather is a concern, not just in New York, but across much of the country this morning, especially for all of you last-minute travelers. In the Midwest, a major snowstorm created some near whiteout conditions, causing delays on the roads and in the air, like in Duluth, Minnesota, where about 10 inches of snow fell overnight. Near Chicago, the high winds delayed flights and caused huge waves on Lake Michigan that pounded this lighthouse. And in the Pacific Northwest, drivers battled icy and snow-covered highways. Tow truck drivers were out in force in Washington state after several cars got stuck on the snow-covered roads. For more on the weather for the rest of the country, NBC meteorologist Shauna Mendiola is here with our Thanksgiving forecast. Shauna, good morning.
And happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Big parade in New York City. The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. I will show you that the forecast is going to be mostly cool, 42 degrees with a gusty wind of 35 miles per hour. It's from 8:30 to 12 o'clock today. Mostly sunny and windy through New York City, but no rain expected there. Should stay nice and dry with wind chill at 32 degrees. So hopefully you're bundled up if you're headed out to the parade. Thanksgiving Day travel. Here's a look at what we expect. Cool and breezy in the southeast. We've got lake effect snow through the plains and a northwest storm moving through areas like the Pacific Northwest. So rain and snow expected there. We've got good travel weather for most of the country, with the exception of the east and the west coast in the Pac Northwest. Saturday, we've got chilly conditions and heavy snow through the plains. A flood threat towards the southeast here, with wind and rain may cause some delays out there for Saturday at the airports. And then interstate impacts for you on Saturday, looking at the Pac Northwest with rain and snow showers, Great Lakes with snowy roads, Texas through Missouri, rain and storms there. For your Sunday, wrapping things up, it's going to be a busy travel day for sure. The major cause will be snow, wind and rain for delays if you are in the East Coast. Look at that, from Atlanta up through Charlotte, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New York, all looking busy. West Coast, nice and quiet. We are going to be looking at rainstorms there. And then as you look at this storm, this is what to expect for the weekend. We've got one crossing the Rockies. Snow stretches across the northern plains, and it'll continue to pass towards the east. Snow moves into the upper Midwest and Great Lakes, showers and storms from Texas through Mississippi. And then we get to Sunday, and rain stretches from the Gulf Coast to the northeast. Wintry mix for the interior northeast as well. In terms of snow totals, could get up to a foot in some of those local spots. Look at the highest amounts. Again, adding up with about a foot of snow through the Midwest. And then looking at the rainfall totals, also looking pretty high, above an inch in some locations as we head to the Sunday forecast. That has been a look at your weather. Have a great day.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or watch live on our YouTube channel.